Everybody knows Nintendo as this amazing gaming company that creates some of the best games and franchises. It's safe to say that pretty much everybody has, at one point or another, played and enjoyed at least one game they made. The thing is, Nintendo was founded in the year 1889, and I'm pretty certain that video games were not a thing back then. When I look at historical footage from the late 1800s, I'm pretty sure all of these people haven't heard of my boy Mario. Also pretty sure these people are all dead, but that's a bit creepy. So let's move on. My point is, if Nintendo was founded in 1889, it means the company is over 130 years old, and video games are not that old. So what was Nintendo doing back then? Our story begins in 1889, when Fusahiro Yamauchi, a Japanese entrepreneur, decided to create a tiny company named Nicobbq. Koppai stands for playing cards, and this is exactly what the company was making at the time. While we're mostly used to playing cards with numbers on them, Nicobbq was creating Hanafuda cards, which are instead relying on drawings of flowers, plants, animals, and a bunch of other man-made objects. Nicobbq developed many different Hanafuda decks, and some of these would become quite popular, such as the Daitoryu deck, which features a picture of the Emperor Napoleon. Fun fact, you can actually still buy some Hanafuda cards from Nintendo today in Japan and even on Amazon. That's neat. In 1902, Nintendo started manufacturing some Western-style playing cards, and while these cards were only supposed to be exported at first, they also got popular in Japan itself, so the company quickly grew. The business changed its name to Marufuku Nintendo Card Company, and in 1907, it entered into an agreement with Nihon Senbai, a tobacco company, to market its cards to a bunch of cigarette stores around Japan. In 1929, Fusahiro actually retired, and his son-in-law, Sekiryo Kaneda, became the new president of the company. He quickly changed the name to Yamauchi Nintendo & Co. Limited and invested in the construction of a brand new building for its headquarters. The thing is, during this era, World War II happened, and it really impacted the business as Japanese authorities prohibited the distribution of foreign card games. This made things quite difficult for the company, forcing it to be supported financially by the wife of Hiroshi Yamauchi, who is Sekiryo's grandson. In 1950, Sekiryo's health started declining fast, forcing him to resign as president of Nintendo and to pass the torch to his grandson Hiroshi. This new president had big things in mind, and he started this off by changing the name of the company again, this time to Nintendo Playing Card Co. Limited. He decided to centralize all manufacturing facilities dispersed in Tokyo, which actually improved the rate at which Nintendo could produce playing cards. In 1953, Nintendo actually became the first company that was able to mass-produce playing cards in the entirety of Japan. This change in direction actually scared a couple employees that were used to Nintendo being a small family business, and it even led to some of them organizing a strike. But it didn't really matter, as Hiroshi just fired the disgruntled employees. Yeah, job protection laws weren't that great back then. In 1959, Nintendo entered into a partnership with the Walt Disney Company in order to create playing cards featuring their famous characters. This quickly led to a boost in sales, and by 1961, Nintendo had sold more than 1.5 million card packs. That's a lot. In 1962, Nintendo became a public company and listed its stock on the Kyoto Stock Exchange, meaning that investors could now own shares of the company. While the Disney deal was great at first, it made Nintendo dependent on the children's market. And at the same time, most adults in Japan were getting kinda bored of Hanafuda cards and started to shift towards new hobbies like bowling and pachinko. This led to a big problem, as Nintendo had no real alternatives, and in 1964, right after the Tokyo Olympics, well, Nintendo's stock price went down to 60 yen, which was a record low for this company. But you know what? Hiroshi Yamauchi wasn't going to let the company die like this, and during this time, Nintendo tried many things. They started a taxi company, they sold vacuum cleaners, and even tried to make instant rice. The thing is, instant noodles were way more popular than instant rice, so this thing failed. There's also rumors of Nintendo entering into a partnership with a love hotel chain, but to this day, it's really hard to find proof of this being a real thing. Anyways, most of these inventions just tanked, and Nintendo really needed something good in order to avoid bankruptcy. In 1965, Nintendo hired a man named Gunpei Yokoi, who was a maintenance engineer for the assembly line. The thing is, this man would actually unknowingly save the company. In 1966, as the president Yamauchi was visiting a factory, he noticed an extending arm-shaped toy, which had been built by Gunpei Yokoi, but just for fun. Yamauchi then asked Yokoi to develop this as a proper toy, and thus the Ultra Hand was born. It became an instant success, selling hundreds of thousands of units. This led to Gunpei Yokoi getting promoted to product development. As he was an electrical engineer, he started developing a bunch of electronic toys, like a baseball throwing machine called the Ultra Machine, and also a love tester. How does that work? I don't know. Anyways, Nintendo also released the first solar-powered light gun, the Nintendo Beam Gun, which was used to shoot light at custom-designed bottles that would split in half upon getting shot. This was a pretty cool looking toy, not gonna lie. In 1972, the first video game console was released, the Magnavox Odyssey, and that console had a light gun accessory that could be used. Well, guess who had a partnership with Magnavox to create these guns? Yup, Nintendo! At the same time, Nintendo was converting old abandoned bowling alleys into laser clay shooting centers. Basically, think Duck Hunt, but inside of a big building. Sadly, running those centers was expensive as hell, and Nintendo was yet again on the verge of bankruptcy. Dang, they can't catch a break. Thankfully, they also developed a mini laser clay version, which was mostly found inside arcade centers. This arcade cabinet was successful and saved the company's butt once again. In 1974, Nintendo released Wild Gunman, which used the same light gun technology, and that game was so successful that Nintendo successfully exported it to Europe and North America. Video games were starting to become more and more popular, and Nintendo wanted to be part of it, so it acquired the rights to distribute the Magnavox Odyssey in Japan, and also reached an agreement with Mitsubishi Electric in order to develop similar products, leading to the creation of the Color TV game, the first ever video game console made by Nintendo. Well, you know what? I say console, but I should say consoles with an S, because those things could only play a few games. So many versions of the Color TV game were released over the years. Some of them featured controllers, others had steering wheels, and others had whatever this thing is supposed to be called. Anyways, things were finally going well over at Nintendo, and in 1977, a new employee by the name of Shigeru Miyamoto joined the company. Does this name ring a bell? In 1979, Nintendo opened a new branch in America. That's right, Nintendo is now living the American dream! In 1980, the Game & Watch was released, and this little thing sold over 43 million units and featured 59 different games. Nintendo also entered the arcade market by releasing games like Sheriff and Radar Scope. These games were actually really popular in Japan, but they didn't have the same success in America, leading to Nintendo being once again in another financial crisis. Like for real, it feels like this company should have been dead a long time ago, but they always manage to figure out a way to save their asses. Nintendo put Shigeru Miyamoto in charge of creating the next arcade game, which would be a success everywhere and would save the brand. No pressure, eh? Guess what came out in 1981? DK, Donkey Kong. That's right, the classic Donkey Kong arcade game was born, and I learned it's actually one of the first games that allowed the player character to jump. Yeah, jumping was a novelty back then. In 1983, Nintendo looked at one of its competitors, the ColecoVision, and noticed that this video game console featured cartridges, which allowed many games to be played without having to manufacture a brand new console every time. Genius! This led to the creation of the Nintendo Famicom, or Family Computer, a brand new console that brought many arcade classics to your home. That's right, the famous Donkey Kong games were all available for this system. Nintendo had strict guidelines when it came to creating games for it though. They had to validate them all and force developers to keep the games exclusive to Nintendo for at least 2 years. They even restricted developers from producing more than 5 games per year. The reasons for these restrictions is that during those years, there were a bunch of video game consoles being made in the US, and some of these consoles just had tons and tons of low quality games released for them. The market was basically oversaturated with garbage games, and this, coupled with the financial recession, led to a video game crash in the US in 1983. Just to give you a basic idea, the video game industry at the time was seeing revenues of over $3 billion, and after the crash, it was about $100 million. That's a big crash, and it impacted Nintendo's ability to launch the Famicom overseas, as people were kinda saving their money now, and with all of those boring games, well, the whole video game industry was fading away. Guess who's gonna save the industry now? Nintendo yet again, baby! Here's the game plan. Instead of selling the Famicom gaming system and its cartridges, they're gonna sell an entertainment system featuring game packs. And it's gonna look like a VCR now. See? It's totally not a gaming console. Pfft, that'd be cringe. Nah. This one is an entertainment system. Well, believe it or not, it worked! The Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, sold like hotcakes, and with the amazing games that came out, I can totally see why. Mario, Zelda, Metroid, Donkey Kong, this system had it all. And in 1988, Gunpei Yokoi and his team created the Game Boy, which also became a success. And after that, well, most of you are familiar with what Nintendo has done and keeps doing. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about the early days a little bit, because I find it really interesting that a company created in 1889 still exists today. From cards, to toys, to video games, Nintendo keeps reinventing itself, and as we have seen, they just refuse to go bankrupt. And that's a pretty good thing too. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.